And just like that, I believe you can all hear me. The sound is making its way into your ears. Images are making their way into your eyes. We're here for Rail Natter. Everyone, good evening. It's going to be, I think this might end up being a bit of a short one, which is fine. That's okay. It might mean that we get to squeeze in a bonus, some bonus Patreon stream content afterwards if we get this one done tight. So let's see. But whenever I say that, it ends up going very long. So let's do this. What might and should UK Labour's nationalised railway look like? That's tonight's episode. Louise Haigh, who's brilliant. I think she's very good. I think Labour actually have quite a good shadow transport team, as well as the kind of the policy people supporting it. A very good point, actually. Where's my... I can't find my lanyard, because, yes, it's worth saying. Solidarity to everyone on strike today. Absolutely. Solidarity to all of those who are on strike today. It's... again, it's not quite a full national strike, but it's a substantial volume of people on strike today. It's strike week. There are more strikes planned as well. Go back to last week's episode to see a bit more about that. We talked about strikes, and then before as well. I'm not on strike. No, the TSSA. The TSSA is my union, and consultancies. It's not. We're not. I would love to rally for strikes, but there's no. We haven't got a grievance, and strike rules are they can't bring the whole union out because union laws are hard. UCU are taking their sweet time about it. So, let's get on with things. We are talking about Labour's plans, which do they or do they not? Possibly yes, possibly no. Factor in, are we going to... I'm waffling because I've just lost my train of thought following the chat. It's good that I have the chat, isn't it? It creates a very succinct podcast. Anyway, are we going to be bringing back British Rail? That's the ultimate question that hopefully we will answer in tonight's episode with, frankly, more scant information than I was hoping for by this point, because the information that Labour are giving away about what they're going to do is pretty thin on the ground. But we shall do our best. All of you chip in with your thoughts as well. If there are any Labour people watching this, do dive in and have your say. I would say it's Chatham House rule, but it's obviously not. This is public and gets recorded for all posterity. Anyway, right, let us continue. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. The InCity 225 fades away. We're going to start with the COVID stats. Oh God, where have I buried I've completely buried my Wacom. It's coming. It's here. It's here. I've got it. Right. Here we go. So the COVID stats. So the ridership stats. Let's have a quick look. There's some interesting things going on. You can see here's the Queen's funeral drop in buses and in cars, which is quite interesting. Not in rail though, because the railways ended up doing a lot of stuff. But you can see there's a bit of there is a general downwards trend for rail, but I don't think it's a linear thing, and I'll show you why I mean that. If you look here, yes, there are lots of other factors. There's a growth element in here, but there is a sort of a general trend, which I think is seasonal. So we see that surge in sort of holiday ridership through the summer peak, and then we see this drop into winter. So I think that's the general trend we're looking at. So Deirdre is here. Hello, Detour is in the YouTube chat. Deirdre, we need you on soon. Actually, we need to have you on about a subject of your own desire and making. Anything you want to talk about, come on, join us. But overdue. Anyway, so that's my general feeling of the trouble is, as I hope Detour might point out, this is such a it's such a multivariate trend. This is not a trend based on a few simple variables. This is a measure of a process or of a data set that's so complex, so varied that it's just not. We're not going It's putting trend lines onto this is daft, but I think there is a general thrust that's happening seasonally. So that's that. The strikes have various sort of effects. So, for example, you can see in fact this is the big strike was this one. Big drop in rail usage. This was another strike. This is another series of strikes. So they're having quite substantial hits to ridership. But you'll see that it recovers pretty rapidly. So if there is a kind of a broad trend, the strikes don't seem to be impacting it long term. But there is a general malaise in the industry at this point that could be accounted for the tail off as well as some of the other stuff. So Zandovic thought the mode usage as percentage change against previous year. Yes, but remember that the industry is relying on it's had a behavioural change with an increased amount of ridership that's transient rather than fixed annually. So you will see trends emerging, such as seasonality of ridership, based on if you have an increase in the number of annoying generic term leisure passengers, but that will result in an emergence here. Pete Johnson is saying we need to know what pre-COVID 100% means. Pre-COVID 100% is not seasonally. It is seasonally compensated. So this is based. These numbers are measured against the same day in pre-COVID times. So there is a level of muddle and ill balance, because things change and blah blah blah. But generally, it's not an unreasonable measure of the differences we're going to be seeing. We're already kind of we should basically assume that we're going to be at pre-COVID levels on average across the country. We have seen changes in pattern, but none of these are new. They've all been embedded, but we all know this stuff. So let us continue. Let me also put a lid on my peppers, which I'm going to eat after rail matter. There we are. Let's get on with the news. First of all, the Dal. It's going to be quick news. Don't worry, I've not done a million things. I've just done a few. The Dalwhinnie report, should I say, from what is quite a scary wrong side failure, resulting in a double derailment, which really worries me. We'll pick into it. It'll be a single episode report. We're going to do. We're going to look at this soon. We're going to do a page turn of this report because there's much for us to pay attention to. Talk about signalling and wrong side failures and some good stuff. So we're definitely going to do a page turn of that. We'll talk about more. But suffice to say, pretty scary recurrence of Clapham Junction, Clapham rail disaster type failures. So very worrying. Manchester has gone yellow more. This is exciting. I like this. I like the TFGM vibes. It's nice. It's good stuff. They've got buses. They've got vans. They're going to slightly re-yellowify the Metrolink, which obviously isn't a metro. Everyone, we know that. The cycle hire. This is nice. So bikes and trams and buses and more buses. This is good, and this has been enabled. Okay, the bus franchising, I'd prefer if it was totally in-house, because franchising still is franchising, but it's a step in the right direction where Manchester's going to fully control its own buses, and indeed it's buying its own buses. This is good. So we're seeing. This is positive, and we should be seeing more of this. And we should also be seeing, as we've talked about in a past relevant episode, we should be seeing more of Manchester taking its suburban rail network under this branding as well. But anyway, so there we go. This is good stuff. So kudos to the team. It's very disappointing that they've got rid of their clean air zone. That's very annoying, but incremental, unfortunately, is the name of the game. Britain's not good at anything radical. Right, so this was interesting. This came off of all I've thinned out the news from all the disaster that is Britain is collapsing entirely in on itself. What's potentially interesting to pull out of that was this list of rail projects that was kind of scheduled for. It was like, accelerate these, though we're not going to give you any extra money, and we're not going to give any guarantee that they are actually going to be progressed. So this is interesting to pick out, though. So top of the list was Cambridge South Station, lovely. The Northumberland line, well, okay, we'll see. These two lead stations that have been in and again, out again for a very long time. Generically, Trans-Pennine route upgrade. Okay, we'll get to that momentarily, folks. East-West Rail, so that's, again, which bit? Don't know. Lead station enhancement, okay. Manchester improvements, what Manchester improvements? Midland Main Line Phase 3, Okay, I presume that's electrification up to... What is that going to be? What is that actually key state? Is that key output 3 that they actually mean by that? Again, I'm deliberately ambiguous. And then Northern Powerhouse Rail, again, what do they mean by that? Well, do they mean just the IRP version? Well, as we're about to find out, no, they don't. So, a bit of a hodgepodge. Of course, this is no replacement for the RNEP, which is still missing in action. The Rail Network Enhancements Pipeline, still not published. So this, in a way, this is the most complete list of projects that the government is working on that has been published for nearly 3 years. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that fantastic? David Thompson is saying that is Sheffield Nottingham electrification. Okay, so this is MMLE to Chef and Nottingham. Okay, interesting. It's reassuring. Anyway, not great. So that's that. But what else is going on? Oh yeah. Let's. So from that, I've actually. You know what? I'm gonna alter the order of the news. Let me just alter the order of the news. This was an oversight on my part. Fine. We're going to... I should have put this one further down, but that's fine. We're going to bear that in mind. We're going to keep this in our minds as we go forward because I've ill-ordered the news, but that's fine. So, what else are we going to talk about? Oh yeah, Hyperloop, which absolutely refuses to die. So, but I keep reaching a point, original Hyperloop companies, this made-up nonsense that they stole off Swiss Metro and Swiss Metro in turn had stolen it off other people. Companies are continuing to die off. The original companies, like Virgin Hyperloop 1 is gone. It's gone. They just collapsed in on themselves. What's the other one? Hyperloop Transportation Technologies has had its planning permission revoked by the French authorities and is going nowhere. But new ones keep popping up. So we had the Canadian one the other day that was making up nonsense about what they're going to deliver. Now we've got Tum Hyperloop, hilariously named Tum Tum. Building for, what was it, like some number of million euros, building a 24-metre test tube. I don't know how you can put a test tube. That's enough to roll it from one end to the other. Are they going to angle it up at one end and roll it down? Anyway, but a bunch of Bavarian, German ministers and people got involved in this. And yes, as Will, hello Will, pointed out, that Hyperloop was being muttered about at Intertrans. Well, we'll get to that because, okay, here's them digging a hole in a car park for this thing, question mark. But also there's this thing, MagRail, which is a Polish company that are doing Hyperloop. But almost what's even funnier, so Hyperloop it's table stakes that Hyperloop is made up bollocks. But what's funnier than Hyperloop, I'm weaving, you know what, should I get my little face up in the corner even though it's the news? Let's get my small face. Hello everyone, I'm here. This Hyperloop made up nonsense, right? Absolute gibberish. But what's even funnier is that they then seem to be suggesting that as some transitory technology, they can use existing rail networks, existing tracks, to get speed. By adapting the existing rail infrastructure, we can enable travel up to 342 miles an hour. No, you can't. You cannot do that. You've made that up. That there is... No, you can't. No, you can't do that. What's funny is that then, bless him, the bold Twitter account of said technology, Nivomo, doing their MagRail, decided to play with fire and engage me on Twitter about this. So I think I said something like, "Forgive me, this is bullshit," and they, with some receipts. And they came in saying, you're forgiven, let's talk in a couple of years, by the way, which I immediately bookmarked. Let's see what happens in a couple of years, which is this company will either not exist or will have done nothing. And then they obviously then put shade on me, saying, with the real burns, we have enough big railway companies joining MagRail development. Why? Because they're grifters. Why? Because they have real experts to evaluate the potential of our technologies. Oh, they don't... They haven't been briefed. They don't know. They have not. They have not been informed of my long-term battles with this rubbish. Clearly. So anyway, that's nice. But this stuff refuses to die. But we can have a little laugh at their expense, can't we? Oh, bigger news is an interesting piece of research from Transport Environment. A little kind of campaign group. I don't know, you might be more than a campaign group. I'm sorry if I've misrepresented you folks. I can't remember, but they do good Twittery stuff, and they do good news articles with some interesting data. Making up the fact that trucks and buses make up just 2% of vehicles, but are responsible for 28% of road transport CO2 emissions. So this is the fact that we have a very short period of time, less than a decade, before we need to be selling the last diesel and petrol engined HGVs. 2035 is when this needs to stop, and this is if we're going to be getting them off the road by 2050. So this is looking at the natural renewal cycle of these vehicles. And it's also pointing out the fact that HGVs represent only 2% of the road fleet, but represent a disproportionate nearly 30% of the emissions. So yes, this is and also it's looking at the fact that there's expected to be almost a 50% increase in HGV activity by 2050. So that's not good. So this no one is looking at doing proper HGV electrification. There's the electrified motorway thing that's fizzled out, and I've not heard anything more about it. Though hopefully fine, whatever. But no one's really talking about actually electrifying HGVs. There's no real effort talking about it. It's just not. There's no one's countenancing it because you just can't achieve it with batteries. So, yikes. What else have we got in the news? Yes. So of course, Rob Parsons and everyone at the Northern Agenda scooped this that Liz Truss was going to U-turn about delivering Northern Powerhouse Rail. Well, she's only gone and continued to repeat this made-up nonsense. You'll notice that my color on for this is Trans-Pennine route upgrade cancelled again. I'll explain why. So let's listen to exactly what Liz Truss says, shall we?
You've said you will deliver Northern Powerhouse Rail in full. Does that mean a full new line all the way from Liverpool to Hull with a stop in Bradford?
It does.
And when will you deliver that?
We will set out the timetable in due course.
Okay, but there will be a brand new electric line with a
stop
stop in
Bradford.
Bradford.
And it will stop at Bradford. I'm very clear about that.
So, I mean, she can promise what she likes. She doesn't care. She's just saying it to kind of as a little bone to throw. So that's not the interesting part about this, right? The interesting part, as I said last time, is that clearly the IRP is toast. But what's funny about that is that the only good thing about the integrated rail plan was that it did put £96 billion on the table, which is like the equivalent of putting £70 billion on the table now because the pound's worth jack. But the IRP did put £96 billion on the table. Government policy now means that if the integrated rail plan is toast, that £96 billion is no longer on the table. What's more, Trans-Pennine route upgrade has got its 9 to 12 billion quid's worth of penny on the back of a downgraded Northern Powerhouse Rail. Northern Powerhouse Rail being the stupid George Osborne term for a new high-speed line between Liverpool, Manchester, Bradford, Leeds and beyond. So this new Trans-Pennine high-speed line, if NPR is back on the table, it means that TRU's 12 billion is off the table again, which means that TRU, which has only just kind of got an idea of its scope and got all snazzy and changed its logo, is now right back at risk again and will be pulled right back away from the brink of starting to deliver designs so that they can change their minds on it again. So the net consequence of this announcement is actually that they've cancelled TRU again. That's what this announcement means, which is not great. That's not very good. Right, anyway, enough of this. Let's talk about Labour and Labour's proposals. And we're going to pick out, there are a few sources. Firstly, Louise Haig's speech, a few little bits between the lines of what other people have said, but most of the speech, but also Tan Dessy. Tan, sorry you've cancelled tomorrow night's event. I'm sorry to be missing you. But okay, it'll be good to catch you soon, I hope. So Tamanjeet Singh Dessy has written a piece in Modern Railways that's worth a little read. Not hugely enlightening about what the proposals are, but it was pre-conference, so it was never going to announce anything interesting. But there's some interesting, like the tagline that Tan has done, and I've seen this coming up in a few Labour places about rail, is affordable, accessible, green as the sort of theme. That's bold statement. Let's see how that kind of continues through. Also, the actual conference speech text is available to read. I'd recommend going back and having a look through this. And I've pulled out the only things that it actually promises into, like meaningful things it promises into some slides, of which there are like 3. There's not to do Louise down, but there could have been more specific about the promise. And this is a bit of a theme here, is that what's actually planned is very wishy-washy. Michael C. We'll get to. Don't worry. Don't go and cancel your tickets for tomorrow night's event, by the way, because we've got new people, and they may not be politicians, but it is going to be spicy. Wait for the end where I'm going to tell you exactly who's going to be coming, and plug it hard. And anyone who's not bought tickets should absolutely come to Politics and Rail tomorrow night at the RE offices in London. Anyway, I digress. Fine. So let's drop in here. This is relevant to Liz Truss's piece a minute ago. Labour are still using the Crossrail of the North line, which winds me up. Oh, shall I change my thing size? But pointer options. I want to go colour, and I want the pen to be white. There we are. They're still saying this Crossrail for the North. There we are, without an R. There we are. Crossrail for the North, which is. So this is interesting because they've added this and, which I don't know whether this is deliberate, but maybe this is because some of what I've been saying is cutting through, in the sense that building Northern Powerhouse Rail, fine, will enable there to be a suburban network across the Northern Pennines. So that's actually makes some sense. Was this an error, or was this correct? But anyway, clearly Labour have got an ambition on from an infrastructure perspective. They've got an ambition to kind of take us back to the point where we're building a high-speed network for the UK. That for GB, sorry. So that's kind of good. Fine. Yeah. Yes, rail. It's worth saying UK Labour do not have a good track record on rail at all. Just to put this out there, they really don't. Labour did mostly hopeless through the New Labour years on rail. They were at best agnostic about the whole system, and actually some of their active policy decisions were to make things worse, to deny cities more control over transport. The general thrust of centralisation was bad. So New Labour were generally bad news for transport in Britain. They can change this, though. They can change this. So what other things? Well, there's some bus stuff here. But this is also relevant. The reason I put this in is because, yes, it's bus, and I know we're talking about nationalised rail, but the key point to pull out here is where I'm reading is this helps give an idea of what Labour's aspirations are hopefully and likely going to be. This isn't a party political broadcast, by the way. This is me not. I'm not tearing Labour down. I'm also not saying. I mean, everyone should basically vote Labour at the next general election. I don't consider that outright because we need to make sure that we are getting rid of the Tories. So, fine, good. But so this isn't a party political broadcast. I'm also not. I have some contact with Labour behind the scenes on some of this stuff, but I actually I'm not really privy to any particular detail on what their hopes are. I do have some of the information about what the previous manifesto was built on. I helped write some of it, and also some of the general, and some of that has clearly been carried forward because largely that manifesto commitment that appears to be largely intact. So fine. So I'm pulling out of these bits and pieces, but this bit's relevant on buses. We will give those communities that want. Oh, did I actually read the last bit for the benefit of the? Oh yeah, I did read it. Fine. I'm going to read this bit on buses for the benefit of the audio-only people. We will give those communities that want it the power to set bus routes and fares following the path set by our brilliant mayors in Manchester, Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, and here in Liverpool City region. Fine. And we will end the ideological ban on communities establishing their own municipal bus companies. This is important because it kind of... this is the important thing about nationalisation that I really feel like Labour should be pushing harder on, is that this hints as to what they kind of mean by the nationalisation thing. And some of the other lines that were a bit generic in the speech, but again hinted at this. So it's why it's worth going back and reading the speech. Hint at the fact that talk about democratic control and talk about accountability and kind of this stuff. And this will help to kind of... I'm kind of hinting at those hints about what they mean by nationalisation, which we'll get to. And the big hit one, which is Labour in power will bring our railways back into public ownership as contracts expire. So that is clearly, this is just talking about train operating companies, right? So fine, okay, good. We'll get to that. We'll have a look at what that actually means in terms of industry structure. So fine. I know that we have talked already in Rail Matter about what structure I think British Railways should have. And this is a format that we've done it since on other things as well. But we've talked a bit about structure, and I stand by my general thoughts on this. So we should, in terms of train operating companies, we don't need to have loads that the public don't need to see lots of them, but we do need to have more central, more not centralized, the opposite of that, more devolved power over transport is critical. And that's a thesis. So let's dive in. That's a thesis I've explored in Rail Natter a lot with John Stone and ourselves in other episodes. We've kind of explored that, and we looked at what branding that Britain's Railway should have as well as kind of part of that theme. So let's jump back to the Williams-Shapps plan for rail, shall we? Gareth Williams is just shouting swallow repeatedly. Yes, I know you like swallow livery, Gareth, that's fine. We're going to talk about the whole industry structure and sort of have a think about what the influence is. A reminder that the fact that Shapps put his name on this means that GBR is all but dead. Like it'll be dead in all but name. They'll maybe keep the name going as a sort of a save face branding exercise. But as we'll find out tomorrow night, which tomorrow night is Chatham House rule. But I think there are sufficient things in there that I'll be able to sort of paraphrase or relay based on the gut feeling of the fact that we have Andrew Haynes coming tomorrow night. And I'm going to be interviewing on a panel with, but hosting and interviewing Andrew Haynes. So that's going to be interesting. Anyway, more on that at the end of the episode. So we're going to dive into first of all, we're going to laugh at the map of industry structure within the Williams-Shapps plan for rail. So looking at the GBR report. So firstly, this is the inverted commas current industry rail structure. It's always funny that they put the Roscoe's down here in its separate little cross-sector bit. Why is that funny? Well, it's funny because in the original Shapps report that preceded the glossy one, they weren't. They were more obviously a part of the overall structure. But they pulled it out into generic cross-sector stuff here, which makes me laugh and is very funny for obvious reasons that the main money-making bit of the rail industry is the Roscoe's. Agreed on the fact that it's BR2, yes. Anyway, lots of chat going on. Current industry structure, fine. So we'll this is the apparent current industry structure according to Williams-Shapps, which was that you have kind of the DFT up here with an industry funding facility and the franchising authority here. You've got this core here of Network Rail, manages the infrastructure, publicly owned. You've got kind of public devolved authorities. You've got a load of arrows all over the place for like regional partners, kind of here, and Transport Focus and ORR here, and then a load of other cross-sector stuff here as well. Blah 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 blah. You also have the freight operating companies. For freight, you have the open access operating companies that run a few of the train operators. And then you have the ScotRail and TFW Rail here within the devolved train operating companies, and then you have the DFT franchise train operating companies. So there's kind of, if you like, this is the bit that a lot of people are thinking of when they talk about nationalisation. They're kind of talking about these, right? And Labour certainly is, because obviously Labour's line about nationalisation doesn't really make any sense. Actually, let's see the specific wording. Bring the railways back into public. Yeah, so really this should have said, Louise should have said not railways, but bring our train services back into public ownership, because that would have been more accurate, because our railways aren't nationalised. They're owned by Network Rail, which is a national body. Everyone says Chatham House rules, but this is incorrect. It's not multiple rules, it's just one rule. It's just the Chatham House rule. Single rule, singular. Yes, exactly. No attribution, just freedom to discuss what was... Yeah, fine. Anyway, so we've got the current industry structure, and then the proposed GBR industry structure, which we can totally ignore and pay no attention to because it's not happening. So don't worry about it. So let's have a... So this is the current industry structure thing, and it's funny because it was from a... This is the original... I need to change my mouse colour now. This is the original kind of Williams... Well, actually, the Williams review diagram. That's then been kind of, so it's got you can see the similarities. So you've got the train operating companies here, rolling stock operating companies here, Network Rail here, but rolling stock operating companies are their own thing, kind of specifically mentioned here, which is relevant. Anyway, because obviously that's a big factor in what is going to be proposed. So having got rid of all that, so let's remind ourselves what is currently a public body. And actually, if you can see green, then that stuff is the national stuff. So I'm going to put red around the stuff that is currently nationally owned. including de facto, in fairness. So there's kind of a reason there's a green one here. You can see there's a green one here. But anyway, so let's scribble out. So Network Rail, that is absolutely a national bit. Fine. So that's kind of the track. And the infrastructure is nationally owned. So in terms of assets, what's the other big asset? The other big asset is the rolling stock. So we've got the track. What about the trains? Well, this is very much decidedly not in public ownership. So if I change my ink color to blue, let's go for this this blue here. This blue, this is very much in private ownership. The Roscoes are owned by a consortium of banks. Only a couple of instances is their rolling stock not kind of privately owned and leased. So there we are. This one doesn't actually have freight in kind of as a big lump. It's kind of got freight out down on its own. Freight operators are definitely kind of a private thing as well. They're absolutely definitely a kind of a private thing. Other than DRS, DRS is not. DRS is national. I actually should have done that. It'd be nice if there's a quick way for me to change colours. But DRS as a freight operator is actually nationalised. So strangely, so. DRS definitely should be renamed to EWS again and use the three beasties because it's such an excellent logo. Anyway, so what else is nationalised? Well, you've got all these bits down here of so infrastructure providers, HS1, HS2. Interestingly, this is kind of a half and half. So HS2 will be and should be national. However, HS1 is private. It's a private thing. So HS1 is kind of private. So that's kind of a half and half situation going on for the kind of the high speed providers. We have got train operators, which are train operators now is kind of pretty much DRS was never EWS. Just to unconfuse everyone, I'm saying that they should steal the brand back from Deutsche Bahn. Who I think probably still own and license the logo, but I think it'd be good in my utopia. I would like DRS to become to name themselves EWS, which would confuse everyone, and to use the three pieces because I think it was an awesome freight livery and logo. HS1. The infrastructure is maintained by Network Rail. It is not managed by Network Rail. High Speed 1 Limited, which is a private company, own the infrastructure, and that's why they charge such ridiculous track access charges. Okay, that's really critical to understand. Not actually critical to the particularly critical to the Labour question. Labour should absolutely terminate that contract, but they won't. So what else we got? Yeah, we got train operators that are again train operators. I'm going to go with a kind of a. I'm going to stripey the train operators because yes, there's private involvement. So a very limited amount of money disappears off to the train operators, to their kind of private bodies, but also they are entirely controlled by the state. So this kind of the train operators are getting a stripey sort of situation. So that's the train operators in there. The devolved authority train operators are kind of mostly nationalised, except they still have some private. The TFW, in fact, no, they're now entirely nationalised. Actually, sorry, forgive me. That they're entirely nationalised. So you can see that there's very much a mixture. We've got this kind of hybrid situation here, where you've got the kind of the actual stuff. So in terms of if we want to split it up, there's the track. So there's the track. Oh, I should do this in black, shouldn't I? Let's go here. Doom. So you've got the track here, and that's kind of, and then you've got the train on top. There's the train on top, and then you've essentially got the driver inside, who's driving it with their nice hat. Let's give him a nice driver's hat. There we go. And in terms of who owns what, we have got this bit is nationalised. So this is nationalised. Hooray! We've got this bit is kind of, so the driver here is kind of here's the driver. They're kind of like half and half. So yeah, we've got this sort of half and half situation where we kind of half owned them with the private because of this strange hybrid situation we've got going on now. There we go. And then the train is private. Now, is this good? No, it isn't, folks. This is not good. There are some bits where track is owned by non-network rail, yes, in various places. Who owns HS1 Limited? It's a bunch of... I think it's mostly a Canadian pension fund owns it. I realise I've just kind of drawn like a shonky kind of face on my rail down here. Anyway, there it is. Right, so what are Labour proposing to do? This is the important question. Labour are proposing to do this. Let's go back to red. So Labour will propose to... So firstly, the network rail is already state-owned, so we know that. That's not changing. We also know that the kind of the devolved tracks are also nationalised, so that's not changing. So, firstly, the rolling stock operating companies, the Roscoes, that own the trains, I do not believe Labour have any plan to change this. So this will stay as it is. That means a fairly substantial stasis in not changing the industry. My hope is that in line with Liverpool and in line with... actually, who owns TFW's TFW Rails fleet? Simon, are you there? Who owns TFW's new rail fleet? My hope is that you might start to see some new trains coming in that will be nationally owned, and they'll be kind of going into the TOCs. So you'll kind of get this flow of kind of trains will start moving into the TOCs, which will eventually, kind of one by one, not all at once, but will one by one become state-owned, which is or state kind of properly state-managed, state-owned. Which you might think, well, they're kind of controlled by the state now. That's bad though, because by the state we mean unaccountably the DFT with absolutely no democratic oversight whatsoever. So. This is where I think Labour should talk up what their proposals are, because I believe that Labour absolutely do want to take some of the control of the TOCs. So essentially, to sever, let's just get rid of my scribbles. So if you can imagine, we've got the situation where currently you've basically got the DFT are the ones who have all the control of the train operators. What Labour are proposing to do is essentially do more of the severing of this, and what luck they have with this, I don't know. But they're intending to divert a lot more of the control to the subnational transport bodies and then into the TOCs. So there will be not just the subnational transport bodies, but also the combined authorities like Greater Manchester and so on. But what I believe the plan within Labour will be to leverage some of that control away from the DFT and put it into some of the subnational transport bodies. Simon is saying that TFW Rail think that Beacon Rail have them. Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay. How much control did the state have over British Rail? A fair amount, but much less than they do now. They have much more control over the railways now than they ever did under British Rail, because British Rail was the body that, okay, they didn't have much money / any money, but the money was just given to them, and they then had the control. And yes, there was Treasury sign-off for things and so on and yada yada, but they had much more control. The main issue we have with our rail network right now is that the government has, or rather DFT and the elected government of the day has too much control over a system that is outside of political cycles. And you might think, well, yeah, because they're elected, they have to control the system. That's how democracy works. Yeah, for a rail system where you have so much importance for the local communities, the control needs to be happening at, and we've talked about this in structure, the control needs to be happening at a local authority as a collective, so into the subnational transport bodies and the combined authority level. So subnational transport bodies and combined authorities is where that control should be. So the trouble with doing anything about the Roscoes, the trouble with why Labour aren't going to touch the Roscoes, they're not going to do this, is because that rolling stock is very expensive. Those banks will be very upset if Labour take the rolling stock off them. So whilst there might be a little bit of gentle encouragement for rolling stock to be procured through directly, the rolling stock operating companies are not going to be touched. And this is a flaw. It's a problem that needs to be tackled. Because essentially, if your ticket, an enormous amount of money from your ticket goes towards leasing a train, that the train operating companies and you know the railway operator should, as a whole, the railway body should have control over. They should have and there's lots of great engineering experience within the Roscoes. That doesn't disappear. You just transfer it over into the train operating company. Ministry, as Barry Jones says, Ministry had the power over the money tax, but they didn't micromanage. Yeah, and again, part of the important thing is that funding power needs to be devolved away from the DfT towards the subnational transport bodies, away from Treasury towards the subnational transport bodies. I don't see Labour coming up with any proposals about that. None at all. That's also an issue. So there are gaps in the plan as a result of that. So the fact that the Roscoes remain private is a headache. Let me go back to my blue because we're going to talk about blue. So the Roscoes, that's a headache. The fact that that's blue is not good. People might be asking about the open access operators. Some people think open access operators are a good idea. I don't think they're a good idea. I think that they just take valuable revenue away from the rest of the system. They in a very busy rail network like ours, they don't add value. They extract money away from the rail systems. Operate as just like anything within a broader country. You want all that money to balance between. You want there to be a balance of the money kind of being made by the long distance services that make a lot of money. Open access operators being some of those need to backfill some of the high subsidy routes. So high income routes subsidise the high subsidy. Give money to the high subsidy routes, and that allows the system to exist as a whole. Which is why franchising was always a bonkers idea. And so open access operators essentially are skimming high value cash out of the revenue stream that should be going into subsidising other systems. So and I know some people, including Nick, who's going to be on tomorrow night, is a fan of open access operators because there's a belief that they drive competition. I don't believe that competition exists in any real sense on a very busy national monopolised network like ours, on a geographically monopolised network like ours. Then there's my thoughts on the possible plan, which is, just to reiterate, the possible plan is that rolling stock operating companies will remain private, open access operators will remain as they are, freight operators will remain as they are. Fine. What else we got? I don't think they're going to touch HS1, much as they should touch HS1. So those are all remaining as private entities. So the idea that it's an entirely nationalised system is not accurate, and it's not reasonable. It's not a thing that it's a bit of a misleading pitch, but the proposal is that we will see obviously Network Rail is already kind of in state ownership, fine, lovely, as are the kind of the devolved authorities, even though in this thing they said private entity, but they're not anymore. But we will see eventually a state control and state ownership of the train operators. Good. And that's it. So at the moment the plans are still not hugely, and it's an indication really that, oh, by the way, and HS2, which should, I hope, not go off in the way that HS1 does. I hope that will be will go to Network Rail and become part of the Network Rail part of Network Rail's infrastructure. So they're not really doing a huge amount that's radical. Oh, that should have been a dashed line. No, I've ruined my amazing system. But the important thing is about the important questions are kind of outside of this, which is why have I just drawn an arrow to my own face? Look, there I am. Hello, it's me. No, the important stuff is about funding. It's about kind of where the kitty kind of is. So the dollar signs. Who's controlling the kitty? And if Labour's plan, which I believe it is to enable a more localised control of those train operating companies, that is a good thing, and that's far more radical and important than actually who. Yes, there are clearly benefits to reducing overheads of bringing train operators in house. That's a no-brainer. You don't have to faff with all that contract management, all the lawyers that deal with the contract management. That's why the idea of keeping them as private entities was always stupid as part of the GBR model. Like, no, just bring them totally in-house. Get rid of all of the lawyers, all the contractual arrangements. That's good, because it's just a waste of time and money, and it means things take so long to get resolved. So that is positive. but the control of those is really key. So I think, and I believe and I hope that Labour are intending to do, so that's a good thing. They're intending to take that control and put it up to the kind of the subnational transport bodies and the combined authorities as well, which are the sort of city region bodies. So that's a good thing. Let's see. TACT plan is the future. So Labour were talking about TACT plan under the previous administration within Labour. I'm hoping that expertise has been retained, although it probably hasn't because Labour have lost all their money and sacked everyone, so including all their advisors. So I'm not sure whether that's actually been retained. But it'd be nice if TACT plan kind of had been kind of kept within logic. And within Louise Haig's speech, there is a discussion, and Tan Dess's piece, there is a discussion of better integration between bus, tram, train, which again implies more of the sort of control by people who are not DFT. Bearing in mind that GBR is going to essentially, this GBR will sort of just be, if it exists at all, will just sort of be just a little branding that'll sit as a sort of a DFT. I was going to say DFT Moon Cup. No, not that. I've got Malcolm Tucker in my head there. That's one of the last things he says in the thick of it, isn't it? Anyway, no, it's this sort of. They will act. I can't get that out of my head now. They're going to act as like branding. The GBR, if it continues to exist, will just act as like branding around DFT. So irrelevant, basically, gone. What should they do? What should Labour be doing? Well, they should buy up all the rolling stock of the Roscoes and bring those into becoming a government asset, and ultimately integrate rolling stock with the train operating companies. They should. I still think there are benefits to track infrastructure people running infrastructure. So I don't think it's necessarily a wonderful idea to totally get rid of Network Rail. But I think what they should do is they should kind of in terms of what's different to their plan. I think, although I'm not hugely fussed by it, I think they should also bring the demise of the open access operators and reintegrate those into the whole. I don't think that'll happen. I think the open access operators will be left to do their thing. But a big one is the Roscoes. It's dealing with the rolling stock, because that'll make such a big difference. You'll get to the situation where you can actually opt, particularly when it comes to digital signalling. It's so difficult to do anything with that because it's difficult contractually to deal with putting the new stuff into the trains. So a major part of upgrading our network requires us to start buying rolling stock back. So the way I would do it is, as routes come up for needing ETCS fitment into trains, buy the fleet. Essentially, buy that fleet. Other ways you could do it, people have mentioned it in the chat actually, which is that you reduce the cost of the rolling stock by buying new stock directly through the TOCs. That is certainly a mechanism you could use. But I would say that you just gobble it up. just say that you're taking it over. I don't care what the arrangement is. It'll be electorally not so tricky. Politically, within a political world, it will be a battle to get that to happen. There'll be a huge amount of lobbying from the banks because they make a lot of money from the Roscoes. Anyway, so that's the kind of key thing, is to sort of sort that out. But other than that, kind of happy for them to kind of keep that as it is. Freight operators, to be honest, can sort of stay. Freight operation can kind of stay private. That kind of is fine, so long as we're facilitating space. I'm kind of at peace with that. If they're guests on our network. Absolutely fine. Facilitate more of that. That's fine. I think there should be a single state operator that can do the kind of the stuff that isn't maybe immediately money making, but so it'd be good if DRS was kind of really boosted, really boost DRS. But actually, I'm fine with the freight operating structure to stay as it is, and also they should claim HS1 Limited, claim that back. Let's get HS1 Limited back. So that's like kind of my ideal plan. So it doesn't necessarily look that different, but it's about the control. Someone's asked the question, are Labour planning to get rid of DFT? No. DFT should, can, and will still exist. DFT's role, though, should be to set broad stuff like mode share spread, for example, or to enable legislative change for the other bodies to do their thing. But they have so much power, because transport stuff ostensibly is easy to cut a ribbon against. That's why they have so much power, because it's easy to do nice press releases about transport stuff. There we are. So that was a kind of, I know that wasn't maybe the detail that you're hoping for, but the reality is there isn't much detail. But I think the key thing within Labour's plans is, okay, fine, they're going to bring the contract in to the train operating companies. That's not a big deal. I think it's a good thing. Fine, it's kind of fine. The key thing is what they do about control and where the control lies. If they retain control, which I don't think they're going to do, but if they do retain all the control within DFT, big problem. If they try and do a bit of a GBR situation, well, it kind of depends how that works out. My view is that generally with collaborative working, you don't need GBR. Do the branding stuff, fine, but you don't need GBR, and the ticketing and all that stuff, fine. So set the structure through GBR for all that kind of back of house stuff and the branding. But in terms of the actual structure of the organisation, I think you can still have a network rail type organisation and train operating units, whatever they're going to be called. But have the train operating units being essentially part of the subnational transport bodies. The important question is whether Labour will call it British Rail. I don't think they will. I think they'll keep with Great British Railways because they're doing the whole GBR. Thanks, Jamie P. It's a good question. I think they're going to keep the GB kind of the Union flags snogging and all that good stuff. If it means we get a socialist government, then fine. They can, or a democratic. So if we get like a mildly socially democratic party, then fine. I can deal with all the anthems singing and stuff if the consequences are that we get that government in and can do some good stuff. So that's fine. But it should be BR, obviously. The great and the ways, basically it should be British Rail because all the other bits are redundant. You know, the Great British Railways is making a much longer name much shorter. What about infrastructure maintenance? Well, infrastructure maintenance is very specifically nationalised as part of Network Rail, but they're de facto the thing that where the line is drawn between renewals and maintenance. De facto, a lot of those contractors that do what you would say is heavy maintenance and renewal are the private contractors. The Murphys, the Osbornes, all of those kind of bodies of the world. Those are not going to get nationalised anytime soon. Because that's just such an enormous alteration to the construction industry. But we might see more I would hope we'd see more in-housing of some of the contracts that have been slipping away again. But absolutely, we need to see a reduction in this drive for Network Rail to be far leaner and become a less intelligent client and get others to do all of its clienting tasks. Because that way ruin lies. That's how projects get really expensive. The cheapest infrastructure projects that Network Rail has delivered in terms of new kind of major infrastructure investment, Airdrie, Bathgate and Borders, were because the client was a well-informed and well-staffed client. If you thin out the client to make it kind of a dumb client and you rely on people like me, you're the consultants, to come in and provide that client knowledge, everything gets very expensive and it slows down because everything is contractual. You have contract tennis and it just delays things. I could go on about projects I've worked on that are just delayed because of contract tennis. Like, that stuff doesn't need to exist. It shouldn't exist. All that delay is very frustrating. Anyway, Crossrail is a good example of that Crossrail is operated by Hong Kong Railways. Crossrail should just be a TfL. TfL should just run it as its own thing, but whatever. Anyway, all of the million people watching, hello to all of you, lovely to have you. I'm going to get rid of my little face because it's time for us to say thanks to all the audio-only people. Hello, I think audio is up to date, so that's good. So thanks to everyone who listened. So many people have been listening to Justin's episode from a few weeks back. So I'm glad you've been all enjoying that. About 2,000 of you have listened to that in podcast form. 2,500 maybe. So that clearly is getting popular through various platforms. Great, happy days. Patreon.com/Gareth Dennis for more of this. I haven't done much Patreon-only content recently. Sorry about that. I will reverse that process. It's been a bit of a hectic one. But I am planning to do a bit more Patreon stuff. Things are afoot for next year in a variety of ways as well. So let's see. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis to throw abuse and notes and the occasional bit of loose change. Thanks to those people who do at me. And GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for the Discord server where all this chat that's happening in the side here, all this lovely chat, continues unabated. You're all lovely in the Discord server, by the way. Thank you. Right, this week is Rail Week. I hope everyone enjoyed as with every Rail Week episode, pick up fewer viewers. than all the others. They're interesting episodes, particularly the last one. We were in a 38 stock. It's fun. It's Rail Week right now. As we went through last time, last week's episode, lovely. Go watch that if you're keen to look at a genuinely interesting discussion about all sorts of things. Go find that. But who do we have for tomorrow night, where I am hosting? I'm hosting YRP's very prestigious Politics in Rail debate. I would love to host it again next year. If I could become a permanent host, that'd be tremendous fun. Let's see if that works and sticks. But very interestingly, also we're waiting to hear back from Hendy. If we got Hendy, that would be very funny. I don't think I'm just going to do a hot off the press check to see if anything new has come through. Lovely. No updates. Good. Yes. No updates to speaker lineup, so that's good. What I can say is we have got Andrew Haynes, the boss of, or sort of one of the two bosses, depending on how you frame things, the chief exec of Network Rail, also the boss of GBRTT, chairing GBRTT, I believe, is his specific role. Christine Quigley is joining. I hope, Christine, I've pronounced your last name correctly. I believe it's Quigley. Anyway, Christine is joining us. Christine, expert across kind of the political field, but with specialisms within the sort of thing we like to talk about within railways. And Steve White, who is a rail boss of one of the train operating companies, Southeastern, in fact. So Steve is joining us as well. And it's a panel. It's not going to be published live. No, you have to just come to it to view it. So it's not a because it's Chatham House rule, which means they get to be a bit more frank about what they say, and we can't quote them specifically on it. I have to be broad, but it should be a very interesting, insightful discussion. I have some interesting discussion points that I'll go through there, such as GBR is doomed, what next? I'd thought of that when previously it was going to be Tandesi, and now, Nick Kingsley's going to be here. Nick is joining us as well. Nick of Rail Gazette International. So that'll be useful to have Nick along. Yes, having Andrew Haynes there is going to be fun because he will have read the discussion and has read my discussion points, my first of which is GBR is dead, what's going to happen now? So it'll be interesting to see what Andrew says to that. I won't be talking about strikes, not because I don't think it's important to talk about it, but because I know that almost nobody in the panel will be able to say anything useful or interesting because they'll be banned. So there's no point having that discussion in there. It's not the right forum for it. So we will be talking about the future. We'll be talking about rolling programs. We'll be talking about management by competition. We'll be talking about there's some very interesting talking points in there. But absolutely, go pick up the last of the. I think there's maybe 10 seats left, so go watch that. Next week, we will be talking about, because a few of you requested this, so Patreon people, look, I'm paying attention. I've been back in the polls thing, picking up. The reason I've not been doing guests for a while is because NDI broke in OBS. Because OBS updated, I can't do Skype things quite yet. So I think I've worked out a workaround. But in the meantime, we're not going to have guests. We're going to have another one with me. We're going to do a bit of a hybrid page turn kind of review of the ORR report into why we had the cracks in a picture being sent by a very dear friend of mine of their wee one looking at RailNatter. Hello, Dr. DT. Anyway, sorry. What happened when cracks grounded the Hitachi UK train fleet? So the AT200, AT300 Hitachi fleet, what actually happened? What was the specific reason the cracks occurred? How has it been fixed? And how far are we from the problem being completely solved? So yeah, we're talking cracks. Stress cracking, that's it. Stress corrosion cracking. Or is it corrosion stress cracking? I can't remember which way around the acronym is. Anyway, that's next week. Time for Big Face. Everyone, I've gone for a tighter mustache this time. Partly because it was uneven and then I shaved it too much one side and I've had to balance it out. So it's a little bit dubious. But anyway, fine. Me with a mustache. It'll widen out again and it'll return. That should be a fun episode. Calf ought to read that report too. So, there's some news that Serco have given up the Caledonian Sleeper contract that's gone back to the Scottish Government. I did see that and didn't add it to the news because, Graham Harris, SCC, thank you. Stress corrosion cracking, marvellous. It's going to be a cracking episode. Yes, thank you everyone here. Very good. Thanks Simon Trains. You did. That was your joke first. True. Any questions before I disappear? No, I don't see any questions. Good. Marvellous. Lovely. Okay, good. Right. That's the wrap. An hour-long episode for once. Oh my goodness. Everyone, it's been a pleasure. Cheerio, cheerio.